Morning. Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony LeBlanc, and today I'm in conversation with James Lancaster, Managing Director of Alderney Electricity, and we're going to discuss the current, no pun intended, energy situation on Alderney. James will also give us his views on the chances of global decarbonisation reaching the planned target dates. Good to see you as ever.
Yeah, here we go then.
Here we go then. Right, let's start. Let's kick off with Alderney electricity, diesel and kero prices.
Yeah. So for Alderney, the prices, well, actually for the Channel Islands, the prices peaked in sort of October, November last year.
Yeah.
And because we have this where we get a fuel delivery every 3 months or so, we were lucky on this occasion that we avoided the peak. So we actually had 2 deliveries either side of the peak. You will, however, remember that through until the end of last year, we were offering a subsidy on electricity prices.
Yeah.
We had to remove at the back end. We had a long discussion with the states about what we might or might not do. So we had to remove that at the end of the year, largely because the money that we had that was available to support that initiative had run out. We'd spent it all during the year. And so from the 1st of January, prices were allowed to float. So as far as the island was concerned, the peak price, the electricity price we saw was from the back end of January. And in fact, on the A tariff, it would have meant that we would have broken the price cap that is set, which is a 50 pence price cap. So the states agreed to raise the price cap up to 60p so that we would not be breaking that requirement. So as it happened, so the way that it operates, the price that is always nearest to the cap is tariff A.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the pay-as-you-go tariff, which is largely the tariff which people are on if they have empty property, or if their property is only used for a small portion of the year. If the property is largely occupied, they're better off on the normal domestic tariff, which is the C tariff. So because of that, the way that those 2 tariffs function, A tariff is always the most expensive tariff. So as it was, at the end of January, the price on the A tariff got up to about just over 56 pence. Whereas on the C tariff, even with the standing charge, you were still, for the majority of properties, was still below the original 50 pence cap.
Yeah. So
the change of price cap was only about dealing with the situation with that A tariff. Since then, the price of diesel and kero has started to fall back. So I think now, kero is still above £1 a litre, which is obviously more than we'd like it to be. That's, it's still at a historic high in that sense. But it has started to fall back. So on the A tariff, we are now back, I think, down to about 52.25 pence on the A tariff. And fuel prices globally have continued to fall. So we are expecting that the next shipment, which is due in May, will continue that trend. So hopefully all of the electricity prices will be back under the price cap. So we're getting back to the kind of levels that we have seen over the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, because there was a bit of a shortage of diesel, wasn't there, throughout Europe?
Yeah.
So that didn't help.
I mean, what really happens, it just takes time for markets to adjust to a new situation, and that's going to be exceptionally slow if the markets are uncertain. And with the situation in Ukraine and Eastern Europe, there was the level of uncertainty which was keeping the prices on the high side, shall we say, trying to be as polite as possible. The reality is that with diesel, particularly the diesel prices, we were seeing the Western European economies were seeing a double whammy, if you like, because we are not just reliant on the Russian oil production, so the actual crude oil coming out of Russia, actually for the middle distillates, which are kerosene, diesel, those types of fuels, we actually receive a lot of those fuels from the Russian refineries. So not only was crude short, but diesel was short. So because of it, so the middle distillates were also short coming from the refineries, which is why for a period of time the price of diesel and kerosene became decoupled from the fuel from the crude price.
Yeah.
So in the long run, by and large, if you watch the trends in diesel and kerosene, whilst there is a little bit of a lag in the system, by and large they follow the same curve as crude prices. But in fact, the diesel prices have risen significantly above the level you would expect them to be on the basis of the prevalent crude oil price at the time, and that was really what was causing that blip in the price of those middle distillates.
Looking at the Alderney unit price, you know, taking into account the actual generation plus the fuel surcharge, it's not too bad compared with the UK anymore, is it?
It's got a lot closer. So the underlying, I'm just trying to think, the electricity bills that I see in the UK at the moment, we're looking at underlying unit prices in the mid to upper 30 pence per unit level. That's largely affected by the hike in gas prices, which of course we don't see over here, so that doesn't really affect us. But in the UK, prices have been massively affected by the shortage of gas for generation. So we're up at about 30, I'd say upper mid 30s. The government is providing a significant subsidy, so those prices aren't really hitting people in the pockets yet, but that's the underlying price. Whereas on the C tariff over here, we're currently at about 43, 44, something like that.
So you know, the gap is narrowing. I mean,
if we go back before the pandemic, you were looking at electricity prices of perhaps 16 pence. The is 43, 44 pence over here. Now it's 35 pence versus 42, 43 pence. So no, the gap's narrowed completely. The whole world, the whole rationale around energy prices has shifted in the last 5 years post pandemic, but shifted in the last 12 months post the invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah, very much so. Remaining on the domestic situation, you're still open to give assistance where necessary for bill payments.
It's always the case. We will do what we can. So, as I always say when we have these chats, if anybody is actually suffering, genuine hardship, and really worried about things, then just come and talk. To the ladies in the office. We will always do what we can to spread payments over a longer period of time. And it's handy at this time of year, particularly because we are moving out of the winter, so our reliance on heating fuel drops, and we're moving into the better weather, the warmer weather. So there is scope over the next 6 months or so to do what we can to support people to get on top of their energy bills by the time that we get around to next winter, and hopefully by then, fuel prices will have all come back down to a more recognisable level.
Now, completion of the underground cabling at the lighthouse end, that more or less fulfills your mission, doesn't it?
The immediate mission that we set off on in 2015-16, it does. So that's the remaining large piece of work from that immediate upgrade program. The substation is now complete. The transformer and all the switchgear is in there, and in fact, it'll be next Tuesday now because we decided to leave it over the bank holiday weekend. We will begin the final phase of all of the network, basically changing the cables over from the old substation to the new station. So there will, and we've got Well, it's quite a complicated jigsaw. So, but by the time that we have, it'll take about sort of 10 days or so to complete all the joints and reconnections that we do. And people out at the east end of the island, so everybody kind of onwards from Sharps Farm in that arc, the other side of Longy Common, there will be some disruption. But we're actually at the moment we're writing to everybody separately, knowing to let them know exactly what that's going to be. But obviously there are periods when we have to take the power off just to affect that to the reconnection to between the old what we used to call Berry's Quarry substation, what we now call the Sharps Farm substation. We are going to be running the east end of the island on a generator for 10 days. So we brought in a big generator to allow us to do that. But there will be probably about, I don't know, maybe 2.5 hours next Tuesday morning when the power will go off. Or I'm expecting it to be next Tuesday morning when the power will go off, just so that we can actually swap the cables over and get the generator going. Then we've got a couple little blips where we actually have to stop the generator because we need to do things like check the oil levels and things like that. So we're talking about the odd quarter of an hour outage. And then there will be, well, at the end of that process, there will be then final power outages for 3 separate groups. So Sharps Farm, Berry's Quarry had 3 cables coming out of it, feeding properties. And we've got to swap those over in sequence. So there will be a short outage while we disconnect those cables from Berry's Quarry and put them onto the new substation. But then it's done.
Yeah. I mean, given the fact that we have some pretty horrible weather here, particularly in the winter, the system's very resilient because it's underground.
Yeah, exactly so. And it has been our efforts. So the longest run of overheads that we had on the island were those which are carrying power out to the east end.
Yeah.
We had one of those came down in November, which meant that we had to start this exercise. So we took we were already building Sharps Farm, but the expectation was that we'd swap that over and the overheads would be still in place and that we would wait for an auspicious time to actually make that change and move those underground. But as it happened, there is no more auspicious time than when the pylons actually fall, when the telegraph, the electricity poles fall over. So
to concentrate the mind.
Yeah, just focus the mind a bit. So we did that in November, and we lost the power out to that island for about a week while we did that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think what we should remember, the resilience that we now have for supplies to the east end of the island is streets ahead of where it was previously.
Yeah, no, it's a good job done. Coming on to
that's it.
Sorry.
So that's it. I mean, there are still bits of work to be done on the network, which were always they sat outside of the immediate program because the immediate program, which is largely about resilience of the network, was based on what we could do without having to engage with anybody else significantly.
Yeah. Whereas
the other bits that we have still to do require cooperation with all the other services.
Yeah.
So we do need to. So we've also got some overheads that run down from the top end of Petit Val down to into Wide Lane.
Yeah.
So we will be relaying the cables between Morio and Picaterre.
Yeah.
But that was, but the water board, the states have always had their project to improve the sewerage there.
Yeah.
So we were simply waiting for that project to go ahead.
Yeah.
And now that they're pushing ahead with the sewerage project there, then we would expect to get that work completed in the next 18 months. The other big one that sat there on the relatively immediate to-do list is sorting the connections out at the through Olivier Street and out onto the Val from there.
Yeah.
But again, Olivier Street is currently sat in the too difficult box simply because it's so costly to pull up all the cobbles and get all of that sorted out, that it's actually easier to wait until such a time as we need to do all the services there. And we expect that to be in the next couple of years or so. In the meantime, nothing's spoiling. So we just wait for as we say, the most auspicious time to do that, when we can share that work with the other services and keep the cost to everybody down as low as possible.
And the inconvenience as well.
And the inconvenience as well. So we just do it all in one hit.
Yeah, yeah. What's happening about the States of Alderney initiative on energy policy? Anything to update us with?
When that was passed, whenever it was, January the 16th, something like that, states meeting, when they actually passed or they approved the energy policy as a state. So I sort of kind of woke up the following morning thinking, crikey, better get on with it now then. And it was funny, it's because we've been working on that for so long, I'd almost forgotten how important it was and what it freed up. So where that's come into place, we have been able to properly have the conversations with states about what the role of the company is going forward, how it will be managed, how it's going to be regulated. So we are working on that with the states as we speak. So watch this space. Further, it gives AEL a mandate to explore renewables properly, which we could only do previously to the extent that we could show that it improved, that we were better off with it. So what we have done is, so up to this point, we have invested in a new power station, and as part of that, the systems that we put in place, which are now approaching completion at that front, because we are already now running the island automated as was intended. The work that we did there, if you like, makes the island renewables ready. But with the policy in place, where the states have said, no, this is actually a priority, and we do wish to now push to get as much variable renewable energy onto the island as possible, which is solar and wind. Now that is part of policy, we can push ahead without any debate as to whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing, because the states have said it's the right thing to do. So on we go. So we have now started feasibility projects on both wind and solar. So we're doing the proper technical feasibility studies on those now. And I expect that the work on both of those to be completed, let's say, within the next 6 months, so by the back end of September. And my plan at that point is to then hold, let's call it an exhibition, call it what you will, down at the power station, giving people the chance to come in and have a look at what we've been doing down at the power station over the last 5-6 years, and also to explore with us what our plans for solar and wind on the island look like. So we should have that all by the end, certainly by the end of the year. We will be out in the public talking about those plans and where we're going with it.
Have the states come up with any ideas in terms of funding it? Because I mean, if you're going to buy a windmill, they don't come cheap, do they?
No, it's for discussion. I mean, yeah. I think if we look at, I mean, so let's look at solar. So if we were to put, we've talked about a solar array on the island.
Yeah.
We talk about a solar array of perhaps 300 kilowatts peak. That is, we're talking something there that's about half the size of the football pitch. We have said that the slope on the glacis by the side of Grona is about the right size for that, and so we just floated that as an idea. Obviously, all of that would, if we did want to push ahead with something like that, that has all to go through planning and otherwise. But at the moment I'm just using it as an example.
Yeah, sure.
The cost of installing something like that, 300,000.
Yeah.
I kind of like, personally, I would like to see if we can't fund that through public subscription, because I think at that sort of price, there is headroom to provide a good return on anybody choosing to invest in such a scheme. Certainly more than you would get from your building society account.
So essentially, what you've got in mind is that you get third-party funding for it. The third party gets a dividend or some sort of interest on it, and presumably you've got to set up a sinking fund to to pay
to
them
replace
back
it.
ultimately. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, but the cost of huge, and who knows by the time we get. I mean, we're talking about an asset that would last us 20 years.
Mm.
So you are looking on at a return on investment over a 20-year period. Now, we could, for example, go. There are lots of companies out there, technical companies, engineering companies, who do that sort of work through power purchase agreements.
Yeah.
So we could go to a Siemens or somebody like that and say, come and build us a solar array, and we will pay you. You fund it, and we'll pay you
monthly rent,
X thousand pounds per annum for the next 20 years.
Yeah,
and
sure.
That's how you make your money.
Yeah.
And I say, well, that's fine, but if we're talking 300,000, actually, rather than pay it to somebody like a Siemens or another organisation, and see all that money drain from the economy year by year, can't we look to the island community and say, if we sell shares in it at a price where everybody could afford to buy a share, if you like, and we were to offer a return, let's say, I don't know, 5% on your money, something like that.
Yeah.
Then I think we are in a position where we could make quite an attractive offer. So I'm not overly worried about, if that works, then we can look at doing the same with wind.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm not overly worried about funding. My biggest issue is I would personally prefer not to have to go off. If we haven't got the money in the kitty, I would prefer not to have to go off island to get the money through a power purchase agreement or otherwise, because all we're doing is knocking a hole in the bucket that is Alderney's economy.
Yeah.
And allowing money to drip out of that for the next 20 years. I would much prefer to keep that island, keep that money in the island and keep it circulating around, paying a return to people on the island for investing in these projects. These are very, very low risk projects.
Oh, very much so. I suppose the thing is that you have a problem trading the shares, don't you, in the event of somebody dying, for example, and things like that. I suppose you as AEL would have to buy them back perhaps at that point,
well, perhaps,
and then resell them.
Yeah. I mean, again, we are talking in the grand scheme of things. We are talking sums of money that are actually so trivial when spread over 20, 25 years that I'm honestly not concerned about that. But I just think it would be great if we can manage to put together a structure that allows the members of the island community to actually invest in the energy future and get a return on it.
Yeah. No, I can see.
I just think that would be really cool.
It's obvious, isn't it? Really,
I think so.
and it is affordable. I would have thought.
I would have thought so. I mean, I look at it and I look at the possible scale of returns we get on it, and I'm thinking, actually, you know what? Considering the level of risk here, that's better than putting your money in a building society or a savings account.
Yeah, everyone's going to need electricity.
Yeah, and everybody benefits from it.
Yeah, very much so.
So that's where I'd like to go. Okay, if we can't get that away for what reason, then there's a conversation between us and the States to say, all right, actually, can we just find the money? Can we do it anyway?
What about the AGCC?
Yeah, well, whatever it is.
Yeah, but I mean, there is spare money floating around from time to time, and it's supposed to be for infrastructure.
Well, and that's a question of what money is available and how do we prioritise it. But it may be that the decision is that that's the priority. Yeah. But failing that, as I say, the sort of returns that we're talking about and the sort of risk, we can always go off island to find organisations that specialise in this kind of investment.
Yeah.
Funding it's not the issue.
No. Where are you on tariff reforms? We've talked about this on several occasions in the past.
No, and that's part of the ongoing discussions with the state's post energy policy about regulation.
Yeah.
So we are still looking to move towards a tariff structure which loads are fixed costs, so the costs we can't avoid that are there whether we generate a single unit of electricity or not, onto the standing charge, and then move and then have a variable charge, which is really just the cost of generating the units that individuals use. So we would see a larger you'd see a larger standing charge to smaller per unit charge.
Yeah.
The the beauty of that is that all of the other issues that we've spoken about in the past around the sort of societal, socioeconomic issues that arise disappear.
Because
the company becomes entirely agnostic about where the electricity comes from. And it actually doesn't matter if we never generate another unit of electricity. As long as we can cover the costs of the infrastructure and the network, we don't actually have to generate electricity. Other people can do that if they want, and it's not a problem then. And then, whereas at the moment, if we allow generation by individuals, whether it's a domestic level or otherwise, if the amount of electricity that the company generates falls, then that fixed cost burden rises, and it means the price of energy goes up for everybody else on the island. But if we can change the tariff structure, then those problems just disappear.
So this is a decision of the States of Alderney, ultimately, is it?
Yeah, and I think we have reached a point as a result of the policy that we are agreed that something needs to happen. So what we are discussing at the moment is what's the fairest. So I think it's gone beyond, the discussion has gone beyond the need to change the tariffs. Yeah. It's now around how do we do that in a way that is fair.
And
again, I'm hoping that some communication will come out to the public within a matter of months about how we're proposing to go with that. It's going to take longer to actually bring that in, to make it happen, simply because the A tariff, the pay-as-you-go tariff, is enshrined in the concession law. And so we can't remove the A tariff without a change to the law.
So is that by way of ordinance? Or do you have to
no, unfortunately. No, unfortunately, that's not one that is changeable by ordinance, because we're actually repealing a part of the law.
Yeah.
So that would have to go through the law offices and all that process. But I think the main thing is that what we're able to do is we're actually to reach a conclusion about where we want to go with that, communicate that with the public, get all of that agreed and sorted, and then we can push ahead with the legal changes to allow that to happen.
Well, I'm sure that ultimately anyone that's here full time, one's going to offset the other, isn't it? Really, in terms of cost.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and there will be relatively little difference.
Yeah. But I think there'll be a better feeling of equity.
They will probably see a small decrease. They will probably see a small decrease in the price. So it's good all round. But as I said, there are lots of benefits that fall out from that if we can move forward.
How do you feel about the fact that we're talking reduction of carbon footprints globally? That is, I've got a friend who's a fairly eminent geologist, a scientist, who doesn't believe in global warming caused by man, and very much takes the view that ultimately the world will go bust because we can't afford to pay for all this innovation. Give you an example, he reckons that in the UK, the national grid will have to be tripled in terms of its capacity. Where does the money for that come from?
Yeah, I mean, so these debates rage, they do, and there are conflicting opinions. I mean, I think there are climate changes over geological time scales. It always has done. We've had ice ages, we've had heat waves, so that's just a geological function. I personally believe that man's activity on the planet is at a level where it actually overlays that natural change with a man-made shift, but some people don't, and I don't. Do you know what? It's what you believe. I personally don't think the debate is at that level. I don't think we've got there yet, because I think those to say, well, we're going to have to triple the capacity on the electricity network just to meet that. Well, that's using existing technology, and I personally believe that the technology which will be required to create wholly sustainable energy systems globally going forward does not yet exist, or at least does not yet exist in at a commercially viable level. And who knows, as those technologies come through, then it may not rely so heavily upon the electricity grids as some people are suggesting, in which case the problem that your friend is highlighting just goes away.
Yeah.
So I think until we've worked out how we're actually going to do it, we don't know the answer to these questions. And so I'm afraid to say that the electricity grids are going to fall over and the cost of upgrading it is going to bankrupt the world. It's a little bit premature, I think, for that conversation.
Okay,
that's my view.
Yeah.
If you take Alderney as an example, again, we've discussed this before, but in this context, electricity on Alderney only accounts for 25% of the energy we use. 2/3 of it is heating. 2/3 of it is the remaining, whatever that is transport.
Yeah.
Now, the big elephant in the room is, how do we decarbonise heating? Because we're heavily reliant on kerosene for heating at the moment. It's nearly all kerosene heating or diesel heating. It's liquid fuel heating. If we were to try and move all of that heat load, that energy load, onto the network, the cost of doing that would be astronomical.
Yeah.
So it's not something, it would take us years and years and years to do that. We all right, we might get it done by 2050, but then we're even pushing it. So some of the deadlines that are out there are already massively unrealistic, because we just can't deploy technology fast enough. So the idea in the UK that you switch off all your gas boilers by 2030 or whatever it is, it's looking very remote.
Yeah.
So a lot of the politically motivated targets are going to go by the board anyway, just because we can't deploy fast enough. But on Alderney, I actually don't see the solution being an electricity-based solution. I think electricity-based heating is part of it, but it's only a relatively small part. Personally, I am interested to continue to follow how the hydrogen economy develops and how technologies using hydrogen develop. Because if we could replace kerosene fuel by the use of hydrogen to heat property, well, problem gone, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Problem is, of course, the fact that you have to use a lot of electricity to make hydrogen, don't you?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And you do need large quantities of renewable or low carbon energy to be able to do that. And so it is, my point here is it's limited. And if you drill in at any level to say, well, how are we going to solve this? Actually, it's not a simple equation.
No.
And the point being is we don't have a solution yet. And so what we really need to do is focus over the next 10, 15 years on working out what the hell the solution is actually going to be. So it isn't there yet. And until we know what the solution looks like, then we actually can't have the conversation about whether your mate is right and we're going to bankrupt the world or not.
Oil and gas are finite. The stuff that you're going to make your batteries out of are going to be finite. I mean, the ultimate solution, as we've always said, you and me, is fusion. Somebody can crack that one.
If somebody can crack that, but ever since they came up with the idea, and the idea's been around forever, it's how the sun works. First work on that, which is what, 40s, 50s. It was reckoned to be 30, 40, 50 years away. Here we are in 2023, and it's still reckoned to be 30, 40, 50 years away.
Yeah.
But soon one has got to hope that man's ingenuity, often driven by adversity, will allow us to crack that one, because if we can crack that one, the problem just goes away.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
No, that's the long-term hope.
And that's an optimistic way of finishing this chat, because I mean, I think you once again, no pun intended, you've got to think positive. Anyway, it's been great to see you. Thank you so much for spending me some time, as ever. And see you perhaps in 6 months' time. See how things are going.
Yeah, I think the conversations with the States will progress. As soon as we're in a position where we can start to see white smoke coming from that particular chimney, then let's have another one of these and we'll start talking about some of that stuff.
Sounds good. Thanks, James.
All right.
Take care.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Tony.
Bye.
Bye now.